Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on a solo effort tonight. There's no guests with me. I've always wanted to do this show actually just to talk to you because I've been absolutely delighted with all the guests that I've had and the conversations that I've had and what we've discussed about and everything's just been just awesome, to be quite honest with you. So I thought what I'd do this particular episode, it's the 26th episode of Live and Uncut. Just to do a sort of a retrospective, not of my work. Don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with my photographs, but just to talk about the guests that have joined me, those that have helped me, and those that have really stuck out in my mind as probably my favourite guests that we've had on the show. So really, the first person I've got to thank at the top of the show is Martin Bailey. Martin and I got talking on Google Plus one particular day after I visited his show, and I asked him about starting such a thing as Google, like a Google Plus Hangout, and he gave me one very big advice. He said, "Go for it, but be sure to stick with it." There's going to be some downtimes where you're not going to be satisfied with the way a show went, or there's going to be downtimes where you're disappointed with a guest who unfortunately can't make it. And to be honest with you, there's been times like that. Not because of the guests that I've had, but because of my performance, where I've been disappointed with the questions I've asked. And yes, there have been certain guests that have declined at the 11th hour, which have left me stranded and looking around thinking what I can do. And thankfully, some very good friends have stepped up to the plate and have helped me out. Those are my good friends in the Arcanum, which I'll come to later, because the Arcanum is becoming a very important part of my photographic interest. So that was my very first thank you, Martin Bailey. My second huge thank you was to my very first guest, Frederick Van Johnson, who, to be quite honest with you, as you know, is such a busy person on Google Plus and on TWIP and all sorts of things. But for him to just reply to me and simply say, "Yep, I'll be part of your show," was just awesome. And Frederick, if you do get a chance to see the recording of this, if you're not watching it live, thank you so much for being my first guest, because to have someone with your notoriety was just an amazing experience for me. I was so nervous that particular evening. It was, I've watched it a few times and I just can't believe the way things turned out. But talking to you and about your career and the way it developed was so enjoyable. So what I thought I'd do was basically, there are a number of guests which I really want to talk about, but I thought the easiest way to do it was so that you can see them, who I'm talking about, that individual, is by going to a screen share. And I've created a live and uncut Pinterest page, which I hope you can see now. And this really just shows you the amazing guests that I've had. I've scrolled to the bottom because, as I said, the first guest was Frederick Van Johnson after my chat with Martin Bailey, and it's really just gone on from there. As you can see, my second guest was Valerie Jardin, a very important person who I want to talk about later because she is linked to the Arcanum in my interest. But look at this: Martin Bailey accepted in my third episode. Ibarrenex, such a fantastic conversation with Ibarrenex. His style of interviewing people on his show is just one which I always go back to and listen to. He's got an amazing ability and touch to get to the basis of photography and the individual he's interviewing. Michael Ramel, wedding photographer, who very kindly stepped up to the plate when someone else had cancelled, and he's got a fantastic blog himself and does a great show, Ready Steady Pro, a podcast which he interviews people. He's from the UK, and he's got a lovely show and a very well followed Facebook group, Ready Steady Pro. The funniest interview I've ever had has got to be Jerry Walden. Jerry and I just hit it off absolutely superbly. It was as if I'd known Jerry for 10, 15, 20 years. He was just an amazing guest to have. We had such a laugh, and I can't thank him enough for joining me. Then we have the extra talented Sarah Jarrett. Now, not a photographer as such, but an artist, and her work continuously amazes me as she uploads her work to Google Plus accounts. The list goes on, really. Mark Horner from Fuji. We had a great conversation about the new XT1 at the time and other products which were coming to hand. He couldn't tell me too much, unfortunately, because of the nature of his business, but such an amazing guest to have at such an early stage. Ollie Sandler, a new photographer on the block, who he's experiencing his style of photography in the grappling, the wrestling. What a great talent he's got. Stephen Cottrell, his forthright, straightforward conversation that we had, very, very interesting. Ted Forbes, what can you say about Ted Forbes that you don't know already? Ted and I had spoken so many times on email, let's get this together, but I hit him just at a very, very difficult time for him in terms of he was changing his career. He was leaving his job and going to start out as a one-off and concentrate on his art of photography shows. And he spared some time to talk to me, and fascinating interview. Rinci Ruiz, street photographer from LA. Lovely conversation. Learned so much from this young man. Great photographer. So much to learn from him. I'm going to cut straight across because one of the most intriguing and in-depth interviews that I had was with High Money. That was in episode 10. I highlight this interview with High because it was everything about racial discrimination, sexism, how a lady makes her way in sports photography. And really, when I first heard this story, it was shocking. It was shocking at the way she had been treated in her early career. Now she is highly respected. She still photographs at Crystal Palace Football Club, and a constant upload of photography on the Facebook and Google accounts. And if it's one interview that struck me and got to my heart, it would be this interview. And if there's one interview that I think you'd be interested to listen to, it wasn't a great visual experience in terms of the camera that High had on at the time, but I really urge you to watch this interview because she epitomizes with the attitude of stick with your dream. Amazing lady, an amazing lady. Let's go to another amazing lady on a more sort of, how can I put it, a higher note, a more happier note. Karen Hutton. Enthuses, absolutely amazing conversation I had with her. She feels photography. That's the best way I can describe it. She feels her photography. When she's setting up, she's thinking of words, she's thinking of songs, which is all basically from her background. But what an amazing talent and great forethinking of her shot that she's taking, but she wants to produce. There's a slight difference there. She's not taking the shot she's seeing. She's taking the shot that she wants to see. Martin Higgs. I came across Martin by watching an Arcanum critique session, and I've got to tell you, this guy's work just blew me away. He's got an amazing talent of photography for hairstyling and makeup. Yes, the artist, the work has been created for him in the hairstyle and the makeup, but he's got to get the photograph right, and this fella can do it. I can tell you, he's got an amazing future ahead of him. Serge Ramilly, you'll know Serge from his regular conversations that he's had on his YouTube presentations, an outstanding editor of work. Again, a person that I followed and asked to interview a number of times, but hit him in a very busy period. But in the end, we managed to hook up. We had a great conversation about his previous work before he moved into tutorial and editing processes. Matthew Maddock. He's got a great Facebook following and produces accessories for Fuji equipment. A very, very good commercial photographer as well. But mind you, some of his products, which he's having made for the Fuji gear, is also worth looking out for. My last episode, as you probably watched last week, Kevin Mullins, probably the one of the most followed and watched at the time live. Kevin Mullins, a wedding photographer with a different slant, more photojournalistic style to his work. an amazing photographer, and literally amazing to listen to him talking about what he's looking to produce in his photography. He gave an outstanding presentation of his work in a PowerPoint presentation, which he set aside. Now, you probably don't know a lot about Thomas Leach. If you don't, I urge you to buy his video about Soul Lighter, I'm in No Great Hurry. It was a short interview, but I was very pleased to talk to Thomas because Soul Lighter is my favorite all-time photographer. And to hear his story of how he set the show up and what he had experienced was truly a very enjoyable interview. Spiros, well, Spiros is Spiros, isn't he? He's just such a happy fella living in Crete. He's got his lovely street hunters following, and puts his broadcasts out regularly on YouTube for everyone wanting to learn about street photography. Search him out on YouTube. There's some very good YouTube videos there that he's produced. Spiros, I can't pronounce his surname. I'm not going to even try. But as you can see, top of my list there is Valerie Jardin. I'm going to go back now to take the screen share off because now I hope you enjoyed seeing those photographs. There's one other photographer I want to talk about shortly, but just while we're on the subject of Valerie, Valerie was my second guest, which was specifically to do with street photography and to talk about her workshops. It so happened that as time developed, I joined the Arcanum, and I was invited to join Valerie's cohort, another word for class, effectively. I can't tell you how much I've learned from Valerie Jardin. She is an amazing teacher. In the Arcanum, they're called masters. She's an amazing teacher, understanding of your ability, points you in the right direction, and at the same time, in a gentle way, persuades you to get into doing more of your style and encourages you to bring your style out into your photography. So I can't thank Valerie enough with regards to for being my second guest, which was a lovely interview. We had a great chat, but secondly, for being my master and the cohort at the Arcanum, which, if anyone is interested to join the Arcanum, go to the Arcanum and do a Google search and get yourself on there, and who knows, I might bump into you sometime. Now, the other photographer which I wanted to talk about is a person which caught my imagination when I joined a workshop of his a few months ago now, Alex Lambrecht. When he advertised his workshop, he said, be prepared to get out of your comfort zone. So naturally, I thought this would be interesting. He's going to do some street photography, a little bit of fashion work maybe, and so I went along. I can't tell you the amazing talent this man has. He is approaching photography, in my opinion, in a totally different way now, which probably hasn't been seen. And I've had other people commented on it as well from other guys that I've interviewed on my show. He is approaching photography, in my opinion, the same way as the likes of David Bailey did back in the 60s. He's changing things. He's producing work for the fashion industry like you've never seen before. And I purely urge you to go to his website, Alex Lambrecht, to have a look at his work. And maybe just think about, can I produce some work like that? It's difficult. I tell you, I'm going on another workshop with him in a couple of weeks' time. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. It's not easy, but the talent this man has is just outstanding. So those are the guys that I really would wanted to mention at the top of the show, so to speak. So how did Live and Uncut come around? Live and Uncut was born from my idea of one camera, one lens. You've probably heard me mention many times that I got very frustrated with carrying a bag on my back. The bag became named as the just-in-case bag because I never used half of what was in the bag. It just basically weighed me down. And it came to a point where I decided to switch from Nikon, which I'd followed and used Nikon for a number of years, probably around about 25 odd years, to a set of equipment which was light, easy, portable, and literally brought the photography back to me. And that was the Fuji XE1. I got the 18-55 zoom lens with it. It's not a kit lens by any stretch you can imagine. It is a top quality lens. So my thanks then go to Fuji. Fuji, in actual fact, by the advent of me switching to Fuji XE1 and the 18-55 lens, started one camera, one lens, which led to me starting Live and Uncut. Now, Live and Uncut was never going to be about one camera and one lens. It couldn't possibly be, because it's a very fine line you're following there. You're down one way alley, and you can't continue a show like there. There are too many other things in photography to talk about. You know, people's work, style, the equipment they use. So Live and Uncut has moved slightly away from one camera, one lens, but it was born from that blog that I started. And as you know, Martin Bailey gave me the encouragement to start the show and to stick with it. And that's what I intend to do. So what's the future plans? Well, the future plans are more guests. Yes, I've got a few lined up. I'm going to take a break next week. I've got a bit of a busy week coming up. The work that puts the money and the food on the table. So I'm going to take a break next week. And then after that, I've got a few exciting guests to bring to you in the Live and Uncut show. As you've probably noticed before, I haven't actually advertised who I've been interviewing, mainly because I was concerned that that person might not appear on the show. And as it turned out, a couple of times, unfortunately, that did happen. But I'm getting a little bit more positive now about the guests. And if I can, I will mention who I'm going to be interviewing in that show. So you'll see something like episode 27 with said guest. And I hope you'll be able to join me. Now, as you know, I've done 5 photographers, one-word associations. That was pretty exciting to start off with. Some of them, my guests, got the idea, others didn't. That didn't matter, because it led to conversation, which is what the show's all about, a conversation of photography, anything associated with photography. Then I switched it slightly to talk about your favorite photographer and the one that you get inspired by. So I'm going to ask that question to myself without asking the question, if you get my idea. My favorite photographer at the moment is Alex Lambrecht. As I said, his style, his approach, his ability, in my opinion, is second to none. And photography is subjective. Please don't think what I say is the bee's knees. It is not. Photography is subjective. But for the moment, Alex is my favorite photographer. The photographer that I get inspired by is Soul Lighter. I came across his work around about 4 or 5 years ago, and it just bowled me over. His style, obviously using film photography, which these images are shown, the layers, the color, that all comes from the using of Kodachrome and Velvia and all those sort of other types of films that he used. Agfa, I remember Thomas Leach, in actual fact, told me that there was so many different types of film canisters in his studio that it was amazing. But Soul Lighter for me is my favorite of all time, the person I get the most inspired by. And I go back to his book many, many times to look at his work. And as I say, at the moment, there is no one that can touch him for my inspiration. So what I'm going to do now, everybody, I'm going to do my usual blog and post, which I'll put up over the weekend. I'll list every single guest that I've had, and I will link that to either a Google Plus page or their own personal website. And if you do get the opportunity to read that blog, I hope you do, you'll see the links there, and please spare the time to go and look at their work, because in my opinion, every single one has got an amazing ability, an amazing talent. And I wouldn't dream of showing my photography on a show where I've had so many talented photographers so far in Live and Uncut. So finally, as I say, it's not quite as long as I usually do the show. I've always tried to keep it to around about 50 minutes, but we always tend to sort of chat on a little bit longer. They tend to stretch over the hour, which I hope that hasn't spoilt the shows for you because they've been long. I'm looking at the possibility of bringing them to podcast on iTunes. That's going to be a little bit more work for me to do. But the main thing about the show, it will remain live and uncut. So let's see how that develops over the next few months. I'm not going to say it's going to happen in weeks, but a few months. And as I always say, at the end of the show, leave your camera bag at home. Thank you so much for watching my shows. Good night, everyone.